I just turned 18 in November. I was going to get married to a man who was 24 years older than I. And I had a great deal of respect for him because he was very smart and he was very capable and he was very rich and he could give me many, many things that I never had. And security not only for myself but for the whole family. And also I felt like I had to get away from some of the things, some of the surroundings, some of the things happening in my life at that time. I just had, this was like an escape, actually more than an escape. It was just like I was running away from a fire or from a flood. My home life was not very good. I was not happy at home. I lived, my sister, who was 2 years older than I, and who gave me a very difficult time because of her attitude towards me. She made me feel guilty. She made me feel dirty. Everything I did, it was, but she wasn't the only one actually. The whole family looked at me like I was I don't know, some kind of a tramp or something, just because, I don't know, I was pretty and I had young boys admire me and so on. I never did anything that anybody else wouldn't be doing. But it was the main reason why I got married is because I had a unhappy love affair with a young man from Romania, and he after talking to me about marriage and the future and painting a rosy picture for me, suddenly decided that, or maybe not so suddenly, decided that he couldn't go through with all these things because his father had died, and also he was far away in Romania. I was in Vienna, and the influence of the family and all that, and so the thing broke off, and it was such a letdown that I just couldn't go back to being a schoolgirl, continue with going to school. I already had been married in my fantasies. I was married, I lived with him, I had children, I had a whole life, and suddenly it was all gone. It just went away like a I don't know how I would say, like a cloud. It just dissolved. And so when this man, Meyer, proposed to me and asked me to marry him, it was a wonderful escape. So the big day came, and I remember it was on a Sunday morning on the 29th of, on the 2nd of January, and snow had fallen during the night, and the whole city was like blanketed white. And I was standing in my parents' bedroom, dressed in my wedding dress and with my veil and all ready, and looking out the window. And we were on the 3rd floor, and I can still see it, the gray and dilapidated looking buildings across the way, and the corner where the 5 streets came together with a big clock on one of the buildings and the streetcar going through there. And I kind of was like suspended. I don't think I was quite there. I don't know where I was. I looked at myself in the mirror and I was pale. I don't know, there was this I don't know, some kind of a concept that when a girl gets married that she doesn't put lipstick on or any kind of makeup on. And I think I was a very sad sight. I guess I was sad. I think I was completely empty of any kind of feeling. I didn't feel anything. I was just like I don't know, like everything that was in me had gone someplace. I was just like a shadow. Well, the day we went to a synagogue, and we had to. The taxi couldn't even come up to the door because the snow had been piled up. I remember having to walk a half a block, and so we got to the temple and went through the ceremony. But I was really not quite there. It was like I was someplace else. Only part of me was there. I don't think I quite understood or didn't want to understand, or was just like in a fog. I only remember that my shoes, my white satin shoes that I wore there were pinching me, and I kept switching my weight from one foot to the next. I don't think I heard what the rabbi was saying, what anybody was saying. And, well, we finally went home to our house in my parents' house, where we had a small how shall I say, a dinner thing, and only the immediate family was there, and everybody in the family was very happy about what I was doing, I think, except my father. My father, I think, when I told him, and I didn't ask his advice, and I didn't ask anybody's advice on what to do, when he asked me to marry him, and Maya asked me to marry him, he was the only one who showed shock. And he was, I guess, very upset, but there was nothing he could do or say. Unfortunately, I didn't have, in a way, I loved my father, but in another way, I was looking down at him because he was weak, he wasn't strong, he was sitting under my mother's heel, and the whole family, and they took advantage of him in any way, and he was not a good businessman, and he was not successful, and he was not a good provider, and a few times during the last few years, he had to ask Maya for financial help when he got himself in some kind of a trouble and needed money, all that. Well, everybody seemed to be very, very happy, because that's like my grandmother's. When I told her I was going to get married to Maya, the first thing he said, "You're going to make the family happy." Of course, my happiness didn't count. Nobody even thought about it. Everybody was happy to know that I was going to be a rich woman, and therefore be a great benefactor to the family, which I guess I became. Anyway, so we had the big party, and not a big party, it was a party. We had a woman came in and she cooked the dinner, and I remember the first thing, I never had eaten turkey before, and she made a turkey. And I was just like dream walking. It seemed like I was only there somewhere, but my spirit, my feelings were someplace else. I was just like a marionette. I was just going through motions. Until the moment when it was time to leave. We were going to go on a honeymoon to St. Moritz, Switzerland. And we started saying goodbye. Xenia, our old maid, she was really more than a maid. She was like a mother to us. And when I said goodbye, she started crying. And when she started crying, I started crying. And I was crying so hard that I couldn't stop myself. And I cried in a taxi going to the airport, to the railroad station. There were no airports yet. It was 1929, and I cried on the train. And I remember Maya, it was completely indifferent to the fact that I was crying. He probably thought, kid, stupid kid, or whatever. I cried all night, so he tried to to make love to me, but he gave up because I was just dissolved in tears until we got to St. Moritz. And we got there and we went to the very fancy Kulm Hotel. And the first thing I did, I remember I went skiing. It shows you how immature I was. I went skiing. I went up to one of the mountains there, and I skied down. And then I took a sleigh, but in coming back there, because we land when you come down from your descent from that mountain, you ended up in a different area. You had to go back by sled to go back to the hotel. I took a sled, but instead of getting into the sled, I was hanging on to it. It was what you call ski earring, being on my skis, and I was very perspired from the ordeal, and the cold wind in that valley was going over my back, and not knowing, being how shall I say, immature. When I developed later on, a couple of days later, I developed pleurisy. But that is not the first thing I want to talk about at this moment. Well, the first night I came on, and instead of trying to make love to me like one would make love to a young person, try to kiss and to caress and to sort of kindle some kind of feeling, erotic feeling or things. None of that. Maya told me I should take some oil. He had bought some oil, and I should put some oil into my vagina because I was a virgin, so that would facilitate to break the hymen. So while I was lying in bed, but the oil smeared between in my vagina, and he came right on top of me and tried to penetrate me. And for God, I don't know for what reason, I will never understand, in spite of psychotherapy for so many times, did I ever understand. I was just like, I didn't know what I was doing, but I had him by his throat, and I was choking him. I was choking him so hard that he had to let go. And we went through this experience several times. Every time he wanted to, I was unconscious. I wasn't aware I was doing it. And finally, at one point, he said to me that he wasn't going to try anymore because he wasn't going to struggle with this thing and so on. And he also didn't want to do anything about it. So the marriage was a failure. But he didn't want to do anything. How shall I say? Can't think of the word right now. And so because he didn't want to embarrass himself, because he was very embarrassing. This whole thing was crazy anyway, a man of 42 marrying an 18-year-old girl. So, but finally one day I managed, after I think 3 or 4 days, I managed finally to not choke him. I didn't choke him, I just gave him a chance. So I remember he did penetrate, and he did break the hymen, and I started bleeding. And I remember I was sitting on the bed, and I was naked, I remember. And I was a pretty girl, and I had a pretty body, I know that. I was sitting on the bed, and I was bleeding, and I was crying. I was crying bitterly. This was and then the next day I developed pleurisy, and I couldn't breathe. I had a tremendous pain in my back. And I lay in bed, and they called the doctor. Well, in one way it was a reprieve, because now he wouldn't come near me for a while anyway, because I was sick. And the doctor came, and I developed fever, and I had to lie in bed, and I was in pain, and I had to cough, and every time I coughed, it was like somebody was putting a knife into my lungs. Or when I had to sneeze, that was even worse. And then when I finally got a little better, I couldn't tolerate the altitude. I couldn't breathe. When I went out, I was just, I just couldn't walk. So we had to curtail our trip. But I remember the first couple of nights that we were there, and to show you how immature I was, I had bought myself, Mai gave me freedom to buy whatever I wanted to buy myself. And being a stupid 18-year-old, I bought myself 6 evening gowns. I didn't have a day dress, but I had 6 evening gowns. I remember sitting in the dining room. There was a couple there from customers of ours with their 2 daughters, and I was sitting there and watching the people dance, and there was one woman. I remember her, and I'll never forget. She was a pretty dark woman, young woman, in a red dress, in a red chiffon dress. And she was dancing with a young man, with a good-looking young man, and it seemed such a beautiful sight, the 2 people that seemed to love each other. And I was sitting there, my heart was breaking.